Hi, welcome back to The Basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today we wrap up our in-depth look at the year 1964, concentrating on what the Beach Boys were up to in a very eventful last 3 months of the year. We'll discuss the year-end charts toward the end of this episode, otherwise this is pretty much all going to be Beach Boys. And as mentioned last time, as the quarter began, at number 5 on the album chart was the Beach Boys' All Summer Long, which had spent 5 weeks at number 4 in August and September. On October 17th, the Beach Boys' When I Grew Up to Be a Man single, which had been released in August, will begin a 2-week run at number 9. On October 19th, the Beach Boys concert album is released, and on October 26th, there's a new Beach Boys single, Dance, 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 with the previously released Warmth of the Sun on the B-side. On October 29th, the Beach Boys perform on an all-star bill at the Tammy Show in Santa Monica, filmed in Electronovision for quick distribution as a feature film. As mentioned last time, it'll open in theaters on December 29th. In the film, audiences are treated to Surfin' USA, I Get Around, Surfer Girl, and the group's new single, Dance, Dance, Dance. On November 1st, just 3 days after the Tammy Show, the Beach Boys undertake a second overseas tour following Australia and New Zealand at the beginning of the year. The Beach Boys head to the UK and Europe for the first time, playing a few shows and making the rounds for radio and TV appearances. I Get Around had gone to number 7 in the UK, giving the group their first top 10 there. I'm sure there was a new awareness of England as an important musical center too. Instead of their usual striped shirts, the Beach Boys appeared decked out in Beatles-inspired and more climate-appropriate matching suits. By the way, I noticed the Keith Badman book and the Rustin Stebbins The Beach Boys in Concert books give widely differing dates for concerts during this period. I am going by The Beach Boys in Concert. On November 9th, while the group was still in Europe, came the US release of the Beach Boys' Christmas album and a new Christmas single, The Man with All the Toys, Back with Blue Christmas, both from the new Christmas album. The A-side will reach number 3 on Billboard's special Christmas chart, the same placement Little Saint Nick had reached a year earlier. Little Saint Nick will return to the Christmas chart again this year, hitting number 6. On November 14th, 2 tracks from the 4 by the Beach Boys EP released on September 21st hit their chart peaks, Wendy at 44 and Little Honda at 65. Released on November 18th is My Buddy Seat by the Hondells, written by Brian Wilson and Gary Usher and produced by Brian Wilson. It'll go to number 87 on January 2nd, 1965. The Beach Boys return from Europe on November 24th and without a break roll right into another half-dozen shows in the US, beginning in Rochester, New York on November 25th and ending in Cincinnati on November 29th before finally returning to California. On December 5th, Beach Boys Concert becomes their first number 1 album. It'll stay at the top of the charts for 4 weeks, basically the rest of 1964. On December 7th, Brian Wilson marries Marilyn Ravel in Los Angeles. On December 18th, the Beach Boys appear on the Bob Hope comedy special doing live vocals over a pre-recorded backing track for their new hit Dance, Dance, Dance. Bob's other guests are Nancy Wilson, James Garner, Martha Raye, and Catherine Crosby. The Beach Boys' appearance had been taped earlier that day. The next day, December 19th, Dance, Dance, Dance begins a 2-week run at number 8 on the chart. On December 23rd, the Beach Boys are featured on the Christmas episode of Shindig. Once again singing live vocals over backing tracks, the group opens the show with Dance, Dance, Dance and closes with We Three Kings of Orient Are from their new Christmas album. In between, they perform Little Saint Nick and, from Beach Boys Concert, currently the number 1 album in the nation, Monster Mash, Papa Oo Mau Mau, and Johnny Be Good. Also appearing are Adam Faith, Marvin Gaye, the Righteous Brothers, and Bobby Sherman. The Beach Boys segments had been taped a few days earlier on December 17th, the day before they taped their appearance for the Bob Hope Show. On the day the Shindig appearance airs, December 23rd, the Beach Boys are scheduled to head out on the road yet again. And by this time, their tour book has been updated to reflect the new Beach Boys concert album. Thought it would be fun to take a look at this. It's basically what you expect from a tour book, some cool pictures, a little bit of text. It also includes a oversimplified and vaguely reality-based story of the group's formation Or, as it's termed here, the Hawthorne hopefuls were dreaming wild dreams of having a rock-a-dandy musical combo that would set the world on fire. In a quote attributed to Brian, the most beautiful part of this whole story is the way this musically awkward squad pulled together to form a team and the significant part each one played in building the organization. Brian is further quoted as saying, "This early chapter of Beach Boys history has been buried under a landslide of subsequent smash hits." Really sounds like Brian Wilson, doesn't it? They also tell us that Brian's newy little Honda sent people racing to the recording studios to climb aboard the motor scooter fad. Not even sure what that's supposed to mean. Maybe you'd race to your Honda dealer, but why are you racing to a recording studio? Anyway, they also tell us, unlike some pop idols, the Beach Boys don't intend to split the teen scene and try to make out with the senior citizens set, which is a good thing, I suppose. Of course, the history is all very simplified, leaving out anything that isn't directly related to their resounding success. Surfin' USA and Shutdown is described as their first Capitol single, and the group as having a raunchy, rhythmic R&R sound. In Brian's bio, he is described as a genial genius and super song wrangler whose head constantly bubbles with new ideas and plans for the Beach Boys. Though inclined to be tense, serious, and intellectual, he has a sense of humor that ranges from the whimsical to the way out. In Mike's bio, already here in 1964, it starts with saying he was born under the sign of Pisces, which they explain as two fish in parentheses. They say it explains his complicated and dual personality. Mike's bio includes a number of supposed quotes, including, "Friends tell me my humor is sarcastic, but that stems from impatience, I think. When I'm out in public and I feel a sneeze coming on, I let 'em have it. I'm a nonconformist and individualist, but I'm not about to live in a cave in Griffith Park. The Beatles are okay, but I like girls better," which seems like a really strange comparison. "I have no problem keeping my nails clean as they are usually in my mouth." We're already seeing Mike as the one whose public statements tend to come off a little weird and maybe not paint him in the best light. Alan is presented as the mature married member of the group who plays Scrabble with his wife every night when he's at home. They tell us Al once dreamed of yanking out molars for a living with a DDS after his name. According to the bio, Al is quiet and pensive, reads books galore, and loves to rack his brain on deeper subjects. His inner strength and warm personality make him one of the most popular members of the group. Concerning Carl, we are told, while the other boys vibrated their tonsils in vocal harmony, Carl alone carried the backing for the Platter Surfin', which launched their careers. And that he's late in graduating from Hollywood Professional High School because he's been absent so often for concert tours and recording dates. Carl is generous, kind, affectionate, conscientious, cooperative, and strongly attached to home and family, especially to big brother Brian, whom he worships. He has a sensitive ear and hopes someday to write songs for the group. The mention that he wants to write songs this early on kind of surprised me. With Dennis, of course, they mention he's the drummer and the original surfer. He's described as a complete outgoing extrovert. Blue-eyed, blondish Dennis is the group's glad-hander, good-timer, mad mixer, and sex pot. He loves to mill around with the mobs in the theater, flirting with the chickies and often bringing them backstage to meet the other lads. There's definitely some British invasion influence there with terms like mad mixer and the other lads. Among Dennis's quotes, "Most of my dreams are about money, cars, and girls. They tell me I'm the guy with the quick temper and the far-out temperament." On the inside of the back cover, you get an ad for the Beach Boys fan club, which they invite you to join to show you care. For $2, you got a membership card with a photo on the back, an autographed photo of the Beach Boys, and a quarterly newsletter. The descriptions of the group are surprisingly similar to the way they've been publicly perceived in the decades that followed. The biggest difference probably being in Brian, who is the confident, gung-ho, boundlessly energetic leader here, without much in the way of the vulnerability or sensitivity that's become so much a part of the way he's thought of. The tour is set to begin on December 23rd with a show at the Music Hall in Houston. It's on the flight to Texas that Brian has what was described at the time as a nervous breakdown. Nowadays we'd probably call it a panic attack. In any case, early in the flight he reportedly snaps and becomes inconsolable. He had been under tremendous pressure, writing, producing, and arranging at a breakneck pace while relentlessly touring with the group. Reportedly, the noise from the amps, as well as the near constant screaming that was now coming from the audiences, was hurting his ear, and also bothering him was that just before leaving town, he had had an argument with his new wife, Marilyn. Brian gets to the hotel and cools off, as he later puts it, and gets through that first show in Houston. A gig for Christmas night in Mississippi is canceled, and Brian returns to California. Meanwhile, Mike and Carl put in a call to session man Glenn Campbell, who agrees to join them on short notice to fill in for Brian. Campbell is familiar with their material from playing their sessions, though he says later that his problem was that he didn't know the words. Glenn Campbell makes his debut with the group on December 26th in Dallas and will appear in place of Brian for the last Beach Boys shows of 1964 and on into the new year. And as a very eventful 1964 began drawing to a close, on that final album chart of the year, December 26th, at number 1, of course, was the Beach Boys concert. At number 2 was Elvis's soundtrack from his latest movie, Roustabout. Kind of astoundingly, it'll go to number 1, replacing the Beach Boys at the top spot on January 2nd, 1965. It'll be his first number 1 album since Blue Hawaii in 1961. As things transpire, it'll be his last number 1 album apart from Aloha from Hawaii via satellite in 1973. The Rolling Stones' 12 by 5 was in the third of 4 weeks at number 3. At number 4 was People by Barbra Streisand. It had gone to number 1 on October 31st and stayed there for 5 weeks until Beach Boys Concert took the top spot. At number 5 was Where Did Our Love Go by the Supremes. It'll go to number 2 for 4 weeks beginning January 16th behind the rapidly rising new release Beatles 65. The Mary Poppins soundtrack was at number 6. This will eventually go to number 1 for 13 weeks beginning April 10th, 1965. More about this, of course, when we get to 1965. At number 7 was the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night, the only album still in the top 10 from the beginning of the quarter when it was in the 10th of its eventual 13 weeks at number 1. At number 8 was The Beatles Story. Capitol's double documentary set had been a hit. This will peak at number 7 next week, January 2nd, 1965. Dean Martin's The Door Is Still Open to My Heart was in the second of 3 weeks at its number 9 peak. It was his second top 10 and third top 15 album of 1964, capping what was probably the most successful year of his recording career. And at number 10 was the soundtrack to My Fair Lady, which will reach number 4 for 2 weeks beginning February 6, 1965. And in top 10 singles as the year drew to a close, at number 1 was I Feel Fine by the Beatles. It showed how far the Beatles had come as recording artists since just the beginning of the year. There were rumors that the strange sound at the beginning was a mistake. Feedback, for those who had heard of it, was something to be avoided at all costs. The Beatles recognized its potential and turned it into art. It was a strong, driving single with a new sound. The Beatles obviously had no intention of standing still even for one moment. It had just reached number 1 and will stay there for 3 weeks. And number 2 was Come See About Me by the Supremes. It's their third hit since their breakthrough in the summer and their third number 1 in a row. It preceded I Feel Fine at the number 1 spot for 1 week on December 19th and will follow I Feel Fine back into the top slot for 1 week on January 16th, 1965. Mr. Lonely by Bobby Vinton was at number 3. His career was still chugging along, seemingly unaffected by the British invasion. This had gone all the way to number 1 on December 12th. At number 4 was She's a Woman by the Beatles. The B-side of I Feel Fine found the Beatles exploring the blues in the vein of Howlin' Wolf. It was in the first of 2 weeks at number 4. At number 5 was She's Not There by the Zombies. This seems emblematic of just how much popular music had changed. A year ago, nobody had ever heard a record like this and wouldn't have known what to make of it. Now it was a major US hit, having gone all the way to number 2 on December 12th. Going Out of My Head by Little Anthony and the Imperials was at number 6. The group that brought us Tears on My Pillow and Shimmy Shimmy Cocoa Bop had switched to a more contemporary, adult-oriented sound since moving to the DCP label. The strategy was working. This was in the first of 3 weeks at its number 6 peak. At number 7 was Ringo by Lauren Green. The star of TV's Bonanza narrated this song about a Western gunslinger, a bad man who stayed his hand to show mercy, knowing he would pay with his life. It was dramatic stuff, but I have no doubt that the fact the song was named Ringo made it a hit. Picturing the Beatles' drummer in place of a ruthless gunslinger turned it into an unintentional novelty hit for a lot of listeners. It had gone to number 1 on December 5th. At number 9 was The Jerk by the Larks. Another late dance craze record, it'll go to number 7 on January 16th. At number 10 was Time Is On My Side by the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones had landed 2 singles in the mid-20s on the chart late in the summer. With this, they hit the US top 10 for the first time. It had gone to number 6 for 3 weeks beginning December 5th. And that will bring us to the end of 1964. Obviously, it was a year of tremendous change in pop culture generally, and for the Beach Boys in particular. Despite changes in popular music since the Beatles' arrival in February, the Beach Boys were more popular than ever, ending the year unchallenged as America's #1 rock group. Arguably, late 1964 might represent the pinnacle of their popularity, though, as we know, there were many more triumphs, challenges, and some great music to come, which we'll get to when we talk about 1965. Now, initially, I had planned to move on and talk about some other time period and some other subject next week, but it occurred to me that there is going to be no better time to talk about the Beach Boys concert album and the Dance, Dance, Dance single than next week. So my plan is, at this point, to try to get it together to talk about both of these records next time. Meanwhile, I look forward to your comments on this. Please hit like if you don't mind, subscribe if you haven't. That is always appreciated. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great week. Bye.